Welcome back, everybody, to Between Two Sermons. So great to have you back with us today.
Good to be here.
Great to have you here.
Good to be here,
Rob. And happy belated Mother's Day to you all the moms out there. Mm-hmm. And that tied in really well this week.
I know. It was kind of a, I'd like to say it was all thoughtfully planned, but no.
Planned by God.
Planned by God.
That's great. Right. And also planned by God. I'm not sure how to sit in these seats.
Okay.
This is interesting. You know,
it's like the old Merv Griffin show. Showing my age here. Didn't he used to have those? Anyway.
I think maybe probably, something like that. Right. Johnny Carson.
It's more better.
There you go.
It's not as old.
So this week we're in 1 Peter 1, 22 to 2:3.
Right.
And this is all about the new birth, but then how we grow in our faith, essentially. Like, what does it look like to actually grow from these infants into mature Christians?
Yeah.
And you use kind of some metaphor for us to latch onto a little bit, because the passage actually uses a lot of metaphor as well.
Crave like newborn babies crave the milk of the word or spiritual milk, however it says it in different translations. So that is the one he uses. And that's where we even get the Mother's Day nod. But I do think what I think most impresses me that you're leading into in your question is that the becoming a Christian, that's why this is the second time in Peter's letter that he reuses the term born again or born a new birth. Why use that again? We've already talked about that, kind of thing. But I think his point is, even in the context of this, how to grow, how to mature, to remind us that, once you become a Christian, and probably almost virtually all the people that became Christians, even in Peter's day, were mature adults. Some kids became believers, but there's people who didn't grow up in the church.
Yes.
And but when that happens, you could be, a well-to-do dad or mom or doctor or teacher. You're starting all over again.
Yes.
And that's sometimes not so easily received. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the messages here is that we, in a sense, we've been born again, given new birth. It's a spiritual birth. It's huge, and it's a gift from God. But to grow, we in a sense are learning the principles and starting from square one.
Yes.
And there's a process, and it's not so it's not cookie cutter. But there are principles and things that we need to do to grow. And a lot of people, sadly, just like, we could say so-and-so in everyday biological growth, they're older, but they're still living, they're not really grown up.
Right.
We say that about some people.
Yeah.
The same thing could be true for spiritual growth.
Yeah. And then you delineate here's what the passage is telling us about what it means to actually go through that process.
Yes.
And first of all is really the concept of getting our sustenance, if you will, from the Word of God.
Yes.
Having that be the place that we go to actually receive food and milk, as the passage describes it.
Yeah.
And there seems to be some sort of mysterious quality to this, where it's not just reading for knowledge's sake, but something deeper is happening within us as we take in the Word of God.
Yeah, no, there's no question. This is many places, throughout the Bible, those of us, Psalm 1, Psalm 19, there's so many places that talks about the role the Word of God plays. I did quote that verse from Hebrews, very well known. But, I think it's one of these kind of, oversights, familiarity breeds contempt, hidden in plain sight. I wonder, for some of us, that we've heard this so many times, that the Bible is so important and it's central to our growth. But what does that really mean? And I think Peter in these verses is trying to, whether he's doing it consciously or not consciously for us in the 21st century, he's challenging, I think, some of our assumptions about what that means. And I'm really interested. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Because you're different from me in one very significant way. You're
bald.
No. Well, yes. Well, I'm on my way. You are you grew up as the son of a pastor. Mm-hmm. You're a second generation Christian. People know what that means. In other words, you grew up in the church.
Yeah.
And that was not my story.
Right.
And even though I went to a church, but basically I would say it was very formalistic and impersonal. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean when you hear this kind of a sermon? I don't know. Or yes. When you see, to me, I guess, I mean, I've been a Christian for a long time, but I think I have a healthy, better than it was 10 and 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago, love and growth in the Word of God. But I never was, I would say, I can say this, I don't know about you. I was never jaded or skeptical or I've heard that before kind of mentality. I don't know that you are. I'm just saying, never had that, because when I first was experienced, exposed to, let's call it the Word of God, I was a young adult.
Right.
I was in. So I'm wondering when I think about someone.
That's a great question. I think for me, and maybe a lot of people in my, position, people who grew up in the church, it was very common to hear this kind of message about the Bible. And I think it's good. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. How I interpreted that, though, was very rote and was very okay, just spend time in the Bible and somehow God will just do his thing. Right. And if you don't,
almost like it's a duty or an obligation.
Yes. Yeah. If in the subtle message behind it was, if you don't, God's gonna kind of be there, not really totally mad at you, but also kind of
grading you, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe like grading.
Yeah.
And I think as I've matured over the years, the way that it's really transitioned for me has been, actually, this is an invitation for God to actually do something.
Yeah.
To experience him in a new way and to develop this intimate connection with him that I couldn't experience in other ways. Yeah. So my time with the Bible and prayer has gone from this rote thing that I have to do to this is my chance now to like you would in a marriage, to say this is our chance to spend time together and to commune with each other. Yeah. That's the kind of way that I now approach.
Good. And would you say, I'm asking you not only to get information about you, but I'm thinking how many people have grown up in the church like you, whether they don't have to be a pastor's kid. Yeah. But can you describe quickly, I know we have a lot of time, but what was that transition like? Was it, at 21 or it just happened, or, you know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't know. It was as simple as that. Yeah. It's like it's like a constant thing. And it's a continual reminder. I think sometimes that mentality still creeps back into my mind. Right. Do this or else. And it's no, John, hold on, chill. This is an invitation from God. Good. This isn't do this.
Plug and
I'm
play.
Going to zap you.
Right.
Kind of thing. This is an invitation to grow closer to him.
Yeah.
So I still have to remind myself, if I'm honest,
that's good.
Do that. And that kind of leads to the obedience thing.
Yes.
Right. So that's your second point.
Yeah. And I was, you just like me, you've been in a teacher and preacher of the word for a long time. And, you're learning stuff all the time, we were joking about Alistair Begg, but we'll never exhaust it. And even just reading this one verse and thinking about it, verse 22, the beginning verse of the passage, chapter 1, verse 22, you are you've obeyed the truth and you're purified. But I don't know if I'm saying the exact words right. Yeah. Purified by your obedience. I thought, wow, I never even really thought deeply about that. Because we talked last week about holiness. Right. You might think of that as a sense of being set apart or being purified. And he's saying, doesn't even say purified by the word of God. Like you're saying, it's just sort of a magic thing, or you get close to it and it does something to you. But by your obedience to it. Yes. And obedience implies, even in the most basic understanding of that word, implies doing things that you might not fully understand, doing things that you might not fully appreciate, that you want to do. Yes. But he's saying the acts of obedience relative to the word of God is in itself what purifies you, not simply
not
more
just
is more.
reading it.
Right.
And yeah. I think that is such a great point right there, because it's really an invitation to apply what we're learning to our lives, not simply get more info into our heads.
Yeah.
So this is off the cuff question.
Yeah.
When's the last time you've had that experience where you're like, oh man, now I got to obey this and I don't want to,
It's a great question. I mean, I think, I think in areas of, probably even when the passage talks about malice and envy, judgment, maybe judgment's a good one, where I feel like if I wasn't in the Word of God, I would, in trying to listen to it and have it speak to me, read me, I think even in areas of judgment, I think it checks me. And I realize I need to obey and not judge, not assume. There's another, I read it recently, Psalm 15, it says, keeping your word even when it hurts. So those are just a couple quick off the top of my head examples of times where I've said, I have to, I'm purified as I'm challenged by those words, let's say not to make a summary judgment about somebody that I don't really know. Of course, I don't walk in their shoes, or where I'm tempted to, not keep my word because it's costing me something. Those are two examples.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's always the part of the process for all of us, myself included. Like this morning, I just I've been reading through Mark. So, there's not one way to read the Bible. There's all sorts of
That's
ways.
right.
And for me, like this season, I'm reading through a book a month. I just kind of am picking a book and I'm diving deep into it. And I'm reading, I was just reading about the feeding of the 5,000 and then not later, not
the 4,000?
Then the 4,000 and the dependence that Jesus wants the disciples to be in this state of dependence.
Right.
Like, you can trust me. Like, why don't you actually trust me?
Yeah.
And they're arguing about bread and, why didn't we bring bread? It's
interesting in that passage. I'm sure you read it. He says when they're still struggling, he says, "Are your hearts still hard?"
Right.
Wow.
Yes.
Sobering.
Yes.
To the disciples.
Yes.
You've just experienced two of the greatest miracles that we're talking about 2,000 years later, and you're still wondering the meaning of them. Are your hearts so hard?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so God's always doing this work in us. Like, no matter how many times you've read these passages, like he's always inviting us into a deeper level of obedience, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I love how you ended it, which is really in this deep love is really where we should be going. That's the ultimate sign of maturity in our faith.
I think that's well said. It's another powerful statement. It's right in the early verses of the passage we read, love each other sincerely and deeply from the heart. Now, you don't use those words unless you're trying to make a point.
Right.
And to say, I'm not talking about, superficial kinds of stuff. And then he mentions in chapter 2, the verses we read also about, don't have malice and envy and deceit. Those are pretty sobering things. He's saying, if a loving person, let me tell you what it looks like, not like this. Someone who refrains, who's maybe challenged by the word that we talked about, the implanted word or the craving the word, and then allows that to challenge our assumptions to with the Spirit's help, maybe help us grow and heal and then be able to live. And ultimately, what's the goal of the Christian life? Love one another as I have loved you. That's a truckload of truth in a sentence.
Yes.
What does it mean to love one another? Well, Jesus died for sinners.
Yes.
He gave up his life. He didn't have a place to lay his head. I mean, his love was very outward and sacrificial, and that's really where the true test of our faith And it's a good way to end this and think about it.
Yeah, for sure. So all of us are probably in different spots as we think about this passage. And maybe you're someone who, isn't consistently spending time with God and the Word. That isn't a judgment on you at this point, but it's an invitation.
I love that word.
It's an invitation. Where are you? Or are you hungry? I think that was one of the ways you phrased it. Are you hungry for the Word of God in your life? If that's you, maybe it's about committing to that next step. For some of us who are spending time with God in the Word, the next step for us is, are we actually obeying what it says? And that you never outgrow that. So no matter what stage we're in, we never outgrow that.
No.
And the ultimate look in the mirror, if you will, if you put this in the, working out illustration, is like the ultimate look in the mirror is, do I look more like a person of love?
Yeah, right.
And am I becoming more of a loving person?
Right. Would someone describe me as that?
Yes.
It's a challenging thought.
That is a challenging thought. And one for you to process, individually, but hopefully in the context of your small groups as well. So hopefully that will lead into a great discussion. So thankful to have you with us today. Thanks again, Rob.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it, my brother.
Boom. And we'll see you next week on Between Two Sermons.